Hey everyone, I'm Lucy.
Welcome to Chili's.
That's Tamoor, and we're back again with another Westworld breakdown.
And hot Vine references.
And hot Vine references like it's 2014. We're here to break down Season 2, Episode 4, The Riddle of the Sphinx.
But before we get into that, if you're a Westworld fan, make sure to go to youtube.com/GameSpot universe, where we've got copious amounts of Westworld content. Copious. We've got breakdowns for every episode so far. We've got a recap of Season 1. And if you watch all of that, you will be more than ready to get involved with the Westworld fanaticism that we are currently drowning in.
Tinfoil hatting,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
So obviously it goes without saying, but just in case, because this is the internet, spoilers ahead for all of Westworld, including the new episode, Riddle of the Sphinx.
Someone's going to complain in the comments. It's going to be me.
Let's kick off with the episode title itself, The Riddle of the Sphinx.
What is the riddle?
Well, that's the thing, it's probably the most famous riddle in history. So the Sphinx was a creature that was told by the gods to basically plague the city of Thebes. And it would sit outside the border, and in order to get inside of Thebes, you had to answer a riddle, and the riddle was thus: which creature has one voice and yet becomes 4-footed and 2-footed and 3-footed? Turns out it's man.
It's us.
It is man. And there was another riddle. There are two sisters. One gives birth to the other, who in turn gives birth to the first. Who are they?
Day and night, Lucy.
Turns out it's man. No, it's day and night. And actually, a little fun addition to the Sphinx story is the person who got the riddle right, because the Sphinx, if you got the riddle wrong, the Sphinx was allowed to eat you, because that's how
That's how it works.
it worked. Oedipus, the one with all the mummy issues,
Had a bit of a complex.
He was the one who solved the Sphinx's riddle, and the Sphinx actually killed itself, or ate itself, depending on which version of the story you hear, because it had been defeated. I did a little bit of reading into the Sphinx, and apparently this story is the literary way in which the ancient Greeks transitioned from the old religious practices, which were represented by the Sphinx, into the new ones, into the Olympian gods, who we all know of. We've all seen Hercules, what a great film, represented by Oedipus. So it seems like the riddle of the Sphinx, cracking the riddle, which in my mind seems to be what the hell is in the hatch, Facility 12, basically solving that riddle, transitioning to a new world, a new era for Westworld.
The one thing we want to pick up on from last week was the cradle that got mentioned, and a lot of people were theorizing in our comments that it's the big control room where everything happens. You see people standing around that cool table.
The big map thing.
Yeah, it's not actually that. That's
No.
the Mesa. So if you sign up to the Delos website, you get an email from Aiden. Learn about the simulation technology that stores and tests all of our storylines, the cradle. Delos' time capsule that ensures that you get the immersive and dynamic experience you deserve. And if you go to the website, you see this image.
Look at these blueprints, red prints, I should say.
Which looks like this room from the trailer.
Yes.
That, ladies and gentlemen, is the cradle.
And the cradle, I think, despite not really being mentioned by name in this episode, I think it has had a lot of influence, certainly. So it says it's a time capsule that ensures you get the immersive and dynamic experience, which could be, if Delos' plan is to make people live forever, well, we know that is their plan. If that's the thing that you download yourself onto, is your cradle, or the main cradle for the whole park could just be this giant, omniscient AI that basically the Master Control program from Tron.
It's a Professor Oak's PC from Pokemon, where you store your Pokemons.
But I think it could maybe simulate all kind of possible outcomes, maybe. And that's maybe what Ford is plugged into, it's a big computer program that's simulating things. And if you go on the Delos website again, there's this VR thing where you can look at a room, and that's been live for a few weeks now. It's James Delos' room, now we know. So the episode starts in where we are initially told is Carlsbad, California, but we're actually in a Delos facility number 12. One thing to note, no Westworldian covers of songs in this episode. It's just pure, straight up songs. So it starts off with Play With Fire by the Rolling Stones.
Good track.
Great track. Also, it helps that in the middle of that vinyl record, it looks like a labyrinth, because they know how much we love mazes.
I like that in the notes that you've written. I think you can get this record player from Muji.
I did actually write that.
Also, very lost. Like, it reminded me of the first introduction to Desmond.
Oh, start of season 2. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a lot of lost vibes in this whole episode, which I'm sure we'll reference at every given opportunity.
So the panning shot goes over a very modern-looking place. We couldn't, for the life of us, make out what that book title said.
I think the value, like, there's probably something in what it's called, but there's also a lot to be taken away from the actual cover itself, which looks to be a world on a water's edge.
Yeah.
And water, world,
The sea.
the motif of water and two worlds, kind of being connected somehow is continuing with that book cover.
We also see an hourglass. So this episode, one of the main motifs is time. An hourglass, obviously, time is running out. Watch that hourglass. So it's basically full at the beginning of the episode, and as you get further and further through it, there is less and less sand in that hourglass. Also, there is a fishbowl in there. So I just thought it would be nice because James Delos has a little pet. No, because later on in the episode you discover that the poor guy is legit in a fishbowl himself.
Yeah.
And just swimming around and around and not really doing anything. So I thought that was a nice little bit, a little nod, a little bit of symbolism. So we see James Delos going through his day. Maybe some bits of that day we didn't need to see.
But
private time, you do whatever you want, Mr. Delos. But it's when he's pouring his coffee and his right hand starts to shake.
yeah.
So that's the first instance that we see him do that. But then he gets a nice visitor. He gets a nice visitor from young William. Brings a glass of whiskey and they have a conversation to establish fidelity. This is a very cool scene. Obviously we see it multiple times. It's very interesting some of the things he says, like if you aim to cheat the devil, you owe him an offering.
And it's the first indication that if it wasn't clear at this point that there's more to the situation than meets the eye, and the idea that this is about prolonged life to some degree.
Yeah, so, he talks about the irony of him running the biotechnology company and he defunded the research for the disease that he was ultimately gonna die from. But then he's having this conversation, he's establishing this baseline, and then he starts to shake. So I'm bringing up, because obviously if you've seen the episode, you know what the shaking means. It's basically because his mind is rejecting reality, as William puts it. But it's not just him who does it. So the characters that we see shaking throughout this episode include Bernard, the barkeeper, and of course, Jim Delos in all of his various iterations, you would say.
Yeah. With that all aside, we return to the Man in Black
And
Lawrence, who are on a journey still, and they cross paths with the worst train track I have ever seen.
It doesn't seem stable.
No, it's being created out of people.
People are being used as sleepers.
Yeah.
One thing that's really interesting to note is the guy very deliberately holding a watch.
Yeah.
This episode is all about time. We're running out of it.
So those gnarly tracks, they should be going north, but the Man in Black very quickly realizes they're going west, which means it leads him to conclude that there's more than just him playing Ford's game. There's multiple contenders.
Could be a reference to, how we're on Symbol Watch, obsessed with that symbol. If there are 4 points to that symbol, like 4 points on a compass, could it be that there are 4 main players? So there's him, there's Maeve, Dolores, and you just said...
As we learned at the spoilers during the spoilers
Spoiler for the spoiler talk.
His daughter.
Grace slash
Emily. Who
she
makes
could
a
definitely be
appearance.
the 4th point.
Yeah.
But that also could mean that maybe there are people, the dots in between the 2 people.
Yeah.
So maybe Teddy is one,
Yeah.
maybe Hector is one, maybe Craddock was one,
and
maybe Lawrence is one.
At this stage, the Man in Black isn't aware that his daughter is in the park.
No.
So effectively, he could be just eliminating anyone who he feels is a threat, or paying closer attention to anyone who he thinks is a threat, such as Craddock, such as Lawrence, whoever it may be. But eventually, they realize that they need to take a detour and go to Las Mudas, where the Man in Black killed Lawrence's wife in front of him. Yes. But that was old Lawrence. This is reset Lawrence. So
yeah, and to be honest, when he said he was going there, I was like, because the daughter, so Lawrence's daughter was obviously one of the key figures in revealing the maze, and it could be that she is another part of Ford's game.
Yeah.
Clementine is so freaking strong. Why is she also zombified and she's just kind of...
She hasn't said anything.
She also hasn't said anything, which is quite weird. I'm worried about her. Worried about you, girl.
I mean, she's clearly not involved in anyone else's plans other than Ford's.
Yeah, completely. She seems to be the pawn that he is using to get people where they need to be. And where they need to be, apparently, Bernard needs to be at this weird cave where he will meet up again with Elsie, who's just been left
She's
there
back.
with some protein bars and a bucket.
Again.
And a bucket.
Very lost.
So after their reunion, Bernard is still struggling with the concept of his self. He can't seem to say the word Ford, like he says Ford. Ford.
Yeah.
It feels like there's an internal conflict there, but also he's slurring, he's stuttering. His hand is shaking. Could that be because Ford has programmed the game into him and he's trying to defy those expectations, he's trying to defy his programming? Or could it just be, all the cortical fluid that's missing from his brain?
I feel like it's not as obvious as just the fluid is missing. I feel like his transcendence is part of this, and him trying to, because at one point in the episode he says, I'm finally in control of my destiny or his life. Are you? It's kind of, I feel like there's like a defying the programming element to it, and it's like his body is trying to hold itself together.
So he reveals to Elsie, look at my iPad, look at my iPad. There is a cognitive lock. Maybe Bernard is the key? Especially when, I don't know, the phrase cognitive lock sort of really jumped out at me there because it feels like maybe his brain pattern had to match the weird language they call it later on. They call it the language code.
It could just be the name of the actual encryption as well.
Yeah.
It's a cognitive lock that basically secures everything in the mind, which is why they're after it and they need to break through it to get all the information out of Abernathy.
So Bernard has a lot of time slips throughout this episode, and this is very lost. The way that they do it, and it just kind of seems like, Elsie later says, your memories aren't in order, they are just kind of floating around each other, and you have no concept of what is now or when things happened. So we see back in Facility 12, we see blood dripping into the white stuff that they make hosts out of. The drone hosts are making eyes, and they we get our first look at making what I assume is a person. The core of a person is that red,
it's the
thready.
evolution.
It's no longer like a circuit.
From the central processing, the brain part of it, where it's taking the personality of a real person and kind of grafting it onto that. It's essentially a soul.
Soul
or a brain,
in a red ball.
A soul and a brain that looked like a cupcake when I first saw it. I was like, that looks delicious. So we're flashing back and Bernard is tied up and Elsie's like, and Bernard's first question is when is this? Yeah, is this now? So he's starting to become more attuned to the fact that he's lost in time and space and doesn't know what's what. And is told that you've got extensive cortical damage.
Yeah. All the red flashing stuff on the iPad kind of alerted us to that.
If I didn't know better, I'd say you tried to shoot yourself.
Which he did.
Which he absolutely did. So,
in season 1.
Yeah, Elsie
because
proving her worth.
Ford told him to.
Yeah, so Elsie's basically like, I'm done with you. I'm going to escape, wait for the cavalry, and Bernard has to effectively tell her that it's all gone to crap out there. There's no one coming. Ford is gone.
Elsie says we're in Sector 22. There's nothing out here for miles. Interestingly, in the last episode when Charlotte met up with those Delos troops, that was in Sector 21. So they're in the next sector over. So it's not actually far from where everything went down, which also explains how Clementine was literally just able to drag him all the way there. Also, interestingly, so I was looking into the meanings of some of these numbers. 22 in its full capacity, is the master builder. It can achieve what can hardly be imaginable. 22s have the power to turn most ambitions and dreams into reality. This is probably the most successful of all the numbers. So I don't think it's any coincidence that they picked number 22. I did this for Lost too, don't worry. Back in 2004, I was looking at numbers. But the meaning of the number 22 is quite interesting because obviously this is the park, this is the sector where the facility lies, where they were able to transcend from being human into being hosts.
Then we have a time slip and we see Bernard walking into the cave. Effectively, it's that bit in a video game where you see your own ghost to show you where to go.
Yeah.
And it's that, and Bernard reveals that there's a facility there, and it's a pretty important one.
It's number 12.
Yeah, so...
Again, I went into the numerology part of Google.
Explain why 12 is important, Lucy, because I know you want to.
I've highlighted it here. So number 12 is related to the tarot card, the Hanged Man. The Hanged Man represents the completed cycle of experience and learned of the possibility of regeneration towards a higher consciousness.
Nailed it.
Basically, is that going from being human to host? Is that what that's meant to represent?
Yep. Elevation, transcendence,
Yep.
all that kind of business is... They picked a good number there.
Yeah, pretty much. They belong to a group of developed souls who have accumulated an unusual inner strength through many and varied lifetimes. And who has more varied lifetimes than hosts in Westworld?
Then we go inside Facility 12, and the first thing you see is that symbol that we spent a little time on last week, the hexagon, the interlocked hexagons.
So it's basically, that's the symbol for their secret project, right?
Yeah, so so the actual lab itself is kind of like a DNA kind of, not harvesting, but manipulation lab.
Yeah, run by drone hosts
Drones,
in particular.
those weird faceless ones that are just power walking around everywhere. Elsie points out that they're making a control unit, they have a control unit printer, which is key to the whole new technology that they're working on. And then we have another flash. We see Bernard and the host drones. So
this is another like couple of timelines. So Bernard, the last time he came here, we now know that he was there to basically kill everyone who was in that facility and steal what lies beneath, what lies within.
And then we have a altercation between Bernard, Elsie, and the weird drone thing.
Well, you see, so those doors when you go in, those were the same DNA doors as from episode
the sniffers.
1. But she touched them, didn't she? I swear Elsie touched it when you went in. It did flash orange. I didn't see it flash green, so maybe that's why it was coming for her. Either way, Bernard is shook when she kills it.
And then he's literally shook because his cortical fluid is leaking out of his ears, and he's like, damn dude, I'm shook.
Elsie says, is Ford in control of you now? And he says,
Ford is dead.
Ford's dead.
Long live Volkswagen.
Oh my god. Two characters meet in unfortunate circumstances. We have Stubbs, head of security, meeting up with Grace. Sadly, they're both being held captive by the Ghost Nation. However, nothing is all as it seems there. Grace can understand their language. The female Ghost Nation warrior says, time is coming.
Time
Is a big theme.
Don't
know if you've picked up on the thing that we're still talking about, which is time, which is very interesting. Grace, Stubbs is like, you've spent enough time in the park to know the language, and Grace says, other people tend to ignore their narratives. I don't like other people very much, which explains a lot actually. Like from the last time we saw her,
she's a bit emo, this less.
She is a little bit. We can also see that the Ghost Nation, they're not killing the humans. So that human couple, the guys, I think we see it like way back in season 1, they arrive at the same time as someone else. I definitely remember seeing them before. But the Ghost Nation are only killing the host. Interestingly, because they didn't respond to Maeve's voice commands.
Voice command, yeah.
Are they protecting humans? Is that why they wanted to take Sizemore?
They could be, yeah, because he's, of the two of them, of the three of them, he's the only human.
Yeah, so maybe they thought they were protecting him from them.
Maybe it's part of Ford's game.
Yeah, that secretly the Ghost Nation are the good guys.
Yeah, one faction program to help preserve the humans, because I assume he doesn't want to completely annihilate them.
No.
He'll want some semblance of humanity to remain, and perhaps the Ghost Nation is what has been charged with making sure that happens.
And Grace, of course, says, I don't want to get out of here. It's because she's looking forward to a family reunion.
We arrive to what looks to be a deserted Las Mudas. There's a barkeeper hanging around who looks startlingly like your boy Ford.
He's wearing pretty much the exact outfit as we see Ford wear in season 1 at one point. So that shook me for a minute. But I think as well, because his hand starts trembling, could it be the Ford in the host thing?
Yeah.
Like he can't, if his mind can't keep a full grip on the host body.
Yeah. Anyone from this point on who looks like they're shaking, there's more to him than meets the eye.
Absolutely.
So as a general rule, anyone who looks a bit unsteady, keep your eye on him.
Host.
And then it's revealed why he's freaked out. It's an ambush. Craddock, just been given freedom, is already up to no good.
Makes his way to the bar.
Straight there.
So when he's rounding everyone up in the church, there's a long shot where he's lingering on this image of the crucifixion, and I think I know why that is, but we'll talk about it a little bit later on where we talk about sort of like the climax of Craddock's story. Very heavy religious influences there. But what's really cool and a big takeaway from this scene is that Lawrence says to Bill that I know you have a daughter, you wouldn't want her to see you get shot up like this. And Bill's like,
did I tell you that?
Oh, I don't remember telling you that. But he did on a previous loop.
Yeah.
So he knows now more than ever just the extent to which the hosts are sort of scrambling to gain
And the
consciousness and remember. But the problem is,
if he's remembering that,
what else is he going to remember? Because him and Bill didn't always have a fun cowboy time riding around the plains together.
there have been many betrayals on that quest line.
Like the time he killed his wife
Yep,
in front of him.
that creates an interesting simmering tension between them that could blow up in the future. So Lawrence reveals what Craddock is after, the weapons. He knows where they're at, and he's like, what we'll do is we'll get him real drunk, and then we'll grab the weapons ourselves and pop them. And Bill goes, cool, stands up and goes, I know where the weapons are, let's make a deal.
Absolutely going to sell you out immediately.
And effectively, like, he tells him immediately where the weapons are, and Craddock's like, that's not how you make a deal, my dude. You're supposed to, set some terms. And he's like, no, I'm going to explain to you where you're going. He's effectively pulling the I know more than you know routine that everyone seems to be doing right now. And he says, I know where you're going. You've been telling your men you know, but you don't. Just a place you think where your dreams are coming true. You call it glory. It's got a lot of names, and I know the way.
Interesting way to get him on board.
Yeah.
Tap into that fear. Because that's exactly what Wyatt did as well. Well, Dolores did. She was like, you're telling all your mates you're going somewhere. You have no idea where you're going. Let me show you the way. So you'd think that he would have learned from that, because he's basically been manipulated the exact same way twice.
It's an interesting way to kind of create this existential crisis in beings that are effectively non-human. Especially at a time when the line between human and non-human is blurring. If you make them aware of that just slightly enough, you could like derail them off and make them do what you want. And that's what this kind of seems to be.
So again, another piece of music. It is Do the Strand by Brian Ferry. Sadly, not another Westworld cover. During this part is where I got my little tinfoil hat on. That grate in the middle. But yeah, I thought there was something more about that, because it's like a hexagonal shape, just like the hexagons in the Delos secret project symbol. So I was like,
Could it be?
Could it be? And actually that's the place where all the fire comes from that completely destroys everything. So I guess it did have meaning.
It's just an incinerator.
It's just an incinerator. So we see basically this entire conversation run through again. Very cool, very clever. We also get to see when James realizes he's not in California, and William says, if you can't tell, doesn't matter.
Which is a fair question.
Fair question, and obviously that is what Angela said to William when he first arrived in the Westworld Park all those years ago. I felt that setting the whole thing on fire was a little excessive.
Yeah, I didn't understand why that was necessary, especially if you're trying to iterate on your project. You don't set it on fire every time, because then there's no project to iterate on. Unless
he wanted to do like a memento thing and leave himself notes. Maybe, actually, so maybe we've solved our own problem there.
Wow.
Maybe that's why he was doing it. Don't trust his lies. And then Grace is still with the Ghost Nation, and she asks them, where we're going, and the lady responds, we are going to the First of Us. He will decide. And the First of Us,
it's a Ketchita.
Who, you'll remember, we saw him IRL, and also as
peeping through a window as well.
Peeping through a window as well. We also saw him, but it turns out he is kind of like the head honcho of the Ghost Nation, and he determines, Grace manages to escape, but he whispers in Stubbs' ear, you live only as long as the last person who remembers you.
I really
quite
like
prophetic.
that line. I like that. It's a very profound line. I like it a lot.
And then from there, the Ghost Nation completely vanished. They're leaving all these humans alone to fend for themselves. I don't know what their possible next move could be. Could it just be that they give you a boost enough to survive for a little bit, and maybe they'll be the cavalry that comes in and helps everyone at the end? But either way,
they're gone.
They're gone for now.
Like some sort of ghost nation. Back in Facility 12, couple of important things happen at various points. Even I'm starting to lose track of. I'm basically Bernard now. I'm like, where is this? When is this happening?
Where in the episode are we?
So the two things that are important to keep a hold of in your mind is that Bernard authorizes the print of a new control unit.
Who is it going to be?
Who are they creating?
Who are they repeating? Could it be Ford? I don't think it's going to be Jim Delos, even though that was his area.
I mean, that's what they were kind of using as a test. He was who they were using as a test subject for it. But I feel like they're beyond him now.
He's not necessary.
Yeah, he's previous generation.
I think my favorite bit of this episode is when Elsie's trying to get into the holding chamber, and Bernard is like, maybe we don't want to know what's in there. And I was like, shut up, Bernard.
Shut up, Bernard.
Please,
this is
like the end of Lost when if Locke decided, no, I don't want to know what's inside the hatch. Yeah. Back in Las Mudas, and Craddock is getting drunk. So he says he's unafraid of death anymore, and this is why I wanted to talk about the when he looks at the crucifixion picture. Craddock basically has a messiah complex because he thinks he's cheated death and that he's above everyone and everything now because he thinks he's bloody Christ revisited. But it's like, I think that's basically why he's acting the way that he is.
Yeah.
Also, there's a nice bit of symmetry, I mentioned this earlier, but it's happening now, is when Craddock's dancing with Lawrence's wife, threatening to kill him. It's pretty much exactly the same as when the man in black was dancing with Lawrence's wife, threatening to kill him. Very nice bit of symmetry. And
then there's a moment with Bill, with the man in black.
Moment. So this is a discrepancy.
The mood has changed.
Oh my goodness. Last mood has changed. Unbelievable. That was actually not scripted. I was taken aback by that. But we get a little discrepancy in the story here. So we have Bill has this flashback to his wife dying. The bathtub is filled with blood, but back when he was describing how his wife died back in season 1, he said that she took the wrong pills while she was in the bath. No mention of her slitting her wrists anywhere. So that's like, did he maybe say that to kind of, I don't know, like.
You want to take the edge off.
Take the edge off how she died.
And no one likes to reveal that a person has committed suicide.
So then Bill cracks and he's talking to Craddock and he's like, you think death favors you? No.
I'm death.
I am death.
Let me show you how to do death.
So basically, before I was pulling together these show notes, I genuinely have written here, what was the point of Craddock? He was the key to some motivations that I think we'll see later on. So with Dolores and Teddy, he was the one who Teddy was supposed to kill, Teddy didn't kill, basically revealing the crack in the relationship between Teddy and Dolores. And I think for the man in black, he is maybe the one who's made him realize this is the job he has to do. This is how he's going to win the game. He has to become death. Let's talk a little bit about the religious symbolism in this. So there's a wall divider, like a room divider, that has crucifixes in the kind of mesh. I think that the crucifixes, with regard to both Craddock and James, represent coming back from the dead. So obviously Christ, the crucifixion, he was the sacrifice that was supposed to unite us all. Jesus dying in the eyes of the Christian faith. I mean, my Catholic upbringing is coming back to me here, but it's
I'm a Muslim, so I'm gonna sit this one out.
It's the event that restored the people's broken relationship with God, and that was called the Atonement. And I feel like I may be clutching at straws here, but I feel like Jim coming back to life and dying all over and over again is it's definitely pulling from that idea that there needs to be a sacrifice that needs to be made in order for the greater good, to become one, to become closer to God. And I think that's maybe what this is pulling towards.
If you want to cheat the devil,
gotta make him an offering. So they try and have the conversation again. He's barely shaking, but he can't get his words out. He can't even finish like a very early sentence in the conversation. William says, it's a cognitive plateau.
Yeah, so this is the furthest he's lasted.
Yes.
But it just means that the degradation is happening a lot quicker. It's like that stamina, if you exercise for long enough, you do it again, and you start getting tired quicker.
Yeah, so this is the 149th time he's been brought back, and this is day 35, so this is when he's beginning to degrade. So he's obviously lasting longer and longer, but then the degradation seems to come on quicker.
Yeah.
And then his hands start to tremble, he's completely disintegrating, and Bill just comes out with, your wife's dead, your daughter's dead, your son is dead, he committed suicide, he took an overdose because he couldn't face reality anymore either. Poor Logan.
Yeah. R.I.P. Logan with his heroin.
And as I said earlier, if you look at the hourglass, there is no more sand left in that hourglass. Time is up for old Jim, and basically Bill decides to pull the plug. What's interesting is that they don't set him on fire, they just say leave him, which if anything is a really cruel punishment. Bill says, the world doesn't need more men like you, not everyone is supposed to live forever. But then at the end, he kind of condemns him to live forever because even though he degrades during that conversation, he's actually still alive. And that is like the most torturous punishment I could possibly think of. So despite Bernard not wanting to go inside, they go inside and there is Don't Play With Fire by the Rolling Stones playing. Why is he flaying himself?
It's a whole madness. I think to him, he still feels like he's a human.
He just wants to feel something?
Yeah, I think it's just like that realization of just trying to go through the motions. It's an incredibly creepy scene. The thing that scared me the most was just slow pedaling.
Backwards slow pedaling.
That is terrifying for some reason.
Even so, the host, I guess that guy was a host because he doesn't seem to be decomposing.
Yeah, the assistant is just killed there.
Yeah. He says, I can see all the way down now, can see all the way to the bottom. Would you like to see what I see? They said there were two fathers, one above, one below. They lied. Only ever the devil. When you look up from the bottom, hell is just his reflection, laughing back down at you.
That's a very, very good line.
Yeah, especially when you think about how he says you aim to cheat the devil, you owe him at least an offering. It's very, despite the fact that they think that Jesus dying and all that is the good side, maybe just everything is evil. It's like what they said in season 1, where it's like hell is empty and all the devils are here, and all the demons are here, kind of thing. Very grim.
Big shout out to Bernard for his hand-to-hand combat skills.
Yeah.
Which came out of nowhere. He was like, wham, crack, and I was like, damn, dude.
I know Kung Fu.
Yeah, that cortical fluid really did the trick.
And we talked about this earlier, but obviously Bernard stealing someone.
A thing.
So the thing is like, is he just going to reach in his pocket and that's going to be there?
Yeah, if it's been there the entire time, what an incredible rustle that is.
And I hope he didn't like squish it when he was getting dragged by Clementine. I was like, oh guys, there's this like this red mush in my pocket. It's Ford.
Has my ass been bleeding?
Elsie says, tell me that was a host and not a human. And Bernard says, it was both. It's Battlestar Galactica again, my dudes. When the humans and Cylons procreate and create us.
Let's go.
Maybe this is all in the past. Maybe all of this has happened before and all of this will happen again. I really need to get off the Galactica kick.
No, never. So then Bernard says something important. He basically says, I get to decide who I want to be, which was said in an earlier episode.
That's pretty much, it's very similar to what Dolores was saying in episode 1. She was like, no, I'm my own person, now I get to make my own decisions. It's all me, apart from the times when it's Wyatt. Yeah, quite interesting. Is that part of the game? Is that part of them just sort of breaking free from their shackles a little bit?
Is he one of the points on the compass now?
Maybe. And I told you that creepy little girl would be back.
Still looks creepy.
Still creepy with her little pigtails and very ominous way of speaking to Bill. She says, they might not remember, but I know who you are, William. One good deed doesn't change that. So that's obviously referring to Bill killing Lawrence's wife. And he responds,
who said anything about a good deed? You wanted me to play your game? I'm gonna play it to the bone.
Bad to the bone, baby. Then you still don't understand the real game we're playing. If you're looking forward, you're looking in the wrong direction.
Interesting, the way she said forward. Forward. If you're looking forward, or are you looking forward? The amount of slurred versions of forward and forward in this episode is quite frequent. So I heard that and I was like, wait a second. Is there a double meaning to that there? Perhaps, perhaps not.
Also, she says if she does mean it forward, then you're looking in the wrong direction. So it means that maybe he has to revisit his path from the past.
We have to go back.
We have to go back. God, sorry, there are so many Lost references now. And then obviously the final part of this episode, the big reveal. So originally when I saw last week's episode, we theorized that Grace would be Teresa, or she's very similar to Teresa in her mannerisms, because I don't know, I felt like a character changing their name was a bit weird.
Yeah.
But I guess not weird enough for Westworld, that's fine. So, confirmation that is his daughter, that is
Grace
Emily.
Emily is his daughter. I like the way they did the reveal because the silhouette they used looked just like Dolores. Note that we didn't see Dolores once in this episode. So when I saw that, I was like, oh, it's Dolores. And then Grace appears and it's like,
hi, Dad.
I am your daughter.
I am so excited. So I wonder if they'll work together, or maybe she's now continuing on his past crusade.
Yeah.
Or maybe
she just wants to play the game, win the game, and get out. And so her dad can stop being obsessed.
Cash out.
Cash out.
All right, thank you for watching as we've been nerding out over season 2, episode 4. Don't forget, we'll be back again when we're taking on the next episode, which, fingers crossed,
Shogun World. Finally.
Finally, there was no mention of it in this episode, so I kind of got a little bit worried, but I think next week.
Remember,
maybe.
If you want to see more of our Westworld content, you can find that on youtube.com/GameSpot Universe. You can also find reviews of each episode on GameSpot.com. Written words. Wow, those still exist.
Anyway, we're on Twitter. I'm at Lucy James Games.
I'm at Tamoor H.
And we'll see you next week.